I'm now going to interview Ira Forman. Ira Forman was the State Department envoy under the second Obama administration, and he has shown great diplomatic skills in creating alliances with foreign governments and NGOs in the fight against specific expressions of anti-Semitism in many countries. Ira, you have done major work as the envoy of the State Department for anti-Semitism. You have done that the whole second term of the Obama administration. If you look back before we look at the future, what would you say are the main things your department managed to do in that period?
Well, I think that's a good way to put it, because it is a department. One individual, especially if at that level of diplomacy and not at secretary's level or undersecretary, it always has to be a combination, because you don't get anything done at State Department without having your colleagues who have some interest in the area, and certainly the embassy. You don't get them on board, you don't get anything done. So it has to be a collective effort. And the thing is, I find that though we're a superpower, even then, the United States rarely can get anything done alone. So nonprofits, allies, Israel, of course, but you have to often get European allies together. And in some ways, putting coalitions together is the most effective way. And it's also probably one of the easiest things you can do is when a government's problematic, and it's not just civil society that's the problem. So I think it's largely symbolic, and it is not a huge substantive issue. But the Homan statue coming down or not being built in Hungary, I think is a classic example where the State Department, and partly because of anti-Semitism, but partly because the trend in Hungary toward free but not fair elections, the undermining of the judiciary, the undermining of checks and balances, there was lots of things and kleptocracy, lots of things that people were upset with Hungary. And so having the embassy, having the European Bureau, but then having Israel, then having our European allies, then having both European and Jewish nonprofits, and even some human rights group all coming together with Congress, we got the Hungarian government to say, no, it's not the right thing to do. Symbolic, but I think it's important for messages to get out in Eastern Europe, from my perspective, of saying, you can do these things, but if you're going to lie about history, then we're going to call you out on it. And if you can live with honoring a Nazi, well, that's fine, but understand the world will know about it.
Can you give other examples?
Well, I think the United States has played a really strong positive role on the working definition of anti-Semitism. We had our own, which was very similar to IRA, but now we actually, in this administration, they have put the IRA definition up on the website, which makes it policy for the United States. Now, the United States, on the working definition, worked largely behind the scenes. When I was there, the Germans, who were the chair in office of the OSCE, they took the lead, which I think was smart, and we worked with them very closely. We worked with Israel very closely to say, who did we have to lobby? And I think there's been some real success after I left, as well as a little bit before I left, with getting the working definition, which I think is a really important tool. We found our working definition, again, very, very similar, that we adopted in 2010, again, before I came on. It was a tool that we could use to go to both governments and civil society and say, look, we consider this is crossing the line into anti-Semitism. We consider this anti-Semitism. Whether you feel you're an anti-Semite or not, this is inappropriate. And criticism of Israel, we don't have any problem. We don't have to even agree with the criticism. But when you cross these lines, you are now getting into some really nasty territory. Very good tool for us. And some people said it impinges on free speech. It does not impinge on free speech. And some said it intimidates people. It's not intimidating. If you say things in a U.S. context, we don't stop you, but then you have to also listen to the response you're going to get. And that response can be powerful. So I think the work we did on working definition, again, not just me, there was a lot of people in the department that worked on it, I think was really healthy. And the other thing I will say I always felt very good about is sometimes, and it's not just the U.S., some of these communities feel very, very isolated, and they don't have a lot of friends. If they have a friend at the U.S. Embassy, if they have a friend they can call in the State Department, it may only be symbolic, but they know they're not alone anymore. And sometimes we were actually able to help them, whether it's security issues, etc., by working with our allies.
What communities are you thinking of, for instance?
We'll have to think about this, because one of the things we always think about is, at the State Department, is you never want to say something which might rebound and hurt somebody. Sometimes it might make you feel good to criticize someone you think is being anti-Semitic or a government that's being inappropriate, but that's not the purpose, to make you feel good. The purpose is to help that community. And if the community tells you, please don't say it publicly, say it privately, we take that real seriously. So I'm not going to give you specifics so much as I'll tell you an example. Let's talk about a Western European country in July of 2014, where the first week of demonstrations against the Gaza war were very traumatic. In lots of countries in Western Europe, security forces in different places lost control of the street, and Jewish property and Jewish people were being intimidated. I got a call from a rabbi in one of these countries after that first week of demonstrations saying, Ira, we have second week of demonstrations. They're going to be bigger, and I can't get anybody in the police or security forces to really respond to us, and our folks are frightened. So I said, I don't know what I can do, Rabbi, but let me make a call. So I called our embassy in that country, and I talked to our DCM, which is the second below the ambassador. I said, this is a situation. So the DCM said to me, Ira, I don't know if I can do anything, but let me try. I never heard back from him. He said I'd get back to you. He never got back to me. But 24 hours later, the rabbi called me and said, I don't know what you did, but we can't get, security people are calling us. What can they do to help us? It's a small thing, but, it makes you feel that, that they feel that they have a friend that will try to help.
Then perhaps we should move to the sudden emergence of anti-Semitism, at least reported in the public anti-Semitism, which partly occurred during the time you were in the State Department, but largely after.
Yeah.
I mean, Charlottesville became a symbol.
Yes.
How do you see anti-Semitism now, the more so as you are lecturing on the topic in the United States?
Well, lecturing doesn't mean you know, and I must say, I even tell my students, I don't have the expertise in U.S. anti-Semitism. Certainly we followed it because we couldn't work on it, that I think I had at least in Europe. Let me say this. I speak a lot these days to Jewish communities about anti-Semitism, and there's a real fear of what's going on. And my response is to them, from what I know, because one of the things we try to do, how do you analyze anti-Semitism? It's not just an incident. It's not just the data. It is talking to people, seeing people's fears, looking at whole different sets of data. There's lots of ways to do the analysis, and you have to kind of do it all. And one of the things I say to them is, we would be foolish, and I say to Jewish communities, all of us would be foolish to ignore this. There are bad signs out there that we haven't seen in a while. Having said that, of all the diaspora communities in the world, the U.S. Jewish community still is by far the most secure, most able to protect itself, is secure in many different ways. Now, that doesn't mean 10 years from now things could deteriorate greatly. None of us know what's going to happen, and we need to be vigilant. But let's also put it in perspective. Jewish communities in parts of Europe, lots of parts of Europe, Jewish communities in small communities like in North Africa, Jewish communities in South America have infinitely greater problems, and we should be aware of that. Not that we should ignore our own problems, but I think we have also an obligation to be helping our brothers and sisters in other places.
How do you see, final question, Europe?
Well, I'm not one who says there's no future for Jews in Europe. I don't know what's going to happen. I know it's our job, whether it's the U.S. Jewish community or the United States, to I'll make sure that that we can help European Jews make their own decision of whether their communities will exist. It's not our role to say you should go to Israel or stay. It's our role to say Jews should be able to live in a democratic Europe and have as first-class citizens without worrying about their security, etc. And frankly, it's not just about the Jews, because if the Jewish community can't, and I think Prime Minister Valls is probably saying that right now, if the Jewish community can't be secure and feels it can't live in Europe anymore, Europe will no longer be Europe. And I think it's not just Prime Minister Valls. A lot of Western European leaders have said that, and I take them at their word.
And you believe that that is not just a verbal statement?
Well, I don't know in front of everybody, but I know I have a feeling of at least a significant number of these folks kind of understand, even if they may not be the best friends of Israel in some cases, that they kind of understand that if they can't protect one minority, a lot of people will suffer. Now, there are leaders in Europe, as we all know, who are not interested in minorities. They're interested in monocultures, etc., and that's a different problem. But in some of these countries, which clearly already have large pluralistic societies, they understand they've got a lot at risk here.
But very often the first minority has to go, so before you deal with the other minorities.
Well, again, I don't want to hold myself out as a tremendous expert in it, but my favorite story is after visiting after the July-August riots in 2014, visiting France and asking the question to a gathering of French Jewish leaders, what's going to happen? And there's a long story, but the end of it is a discussion of lots of people thinking they want to go, but how difficult it is to go, even when things got bad, and ultimately coming to the conclusion, ultimately this is not about us. This is about the very values of the French Republic. We may be the first to go, but we won't be the last.